And baby, I'm TFC till I die.
Hello and welcome back to Toronto Till I Die, the Toronto FC fan show. I'm Mike Newell, and for us TFC supporters, it's been a long 2023, but we made it. We made it to the final TTID of the year. We got vibes kits going on. I'm throwing back some retro stuff with the red and white. Michael Singh's back from Montreal, though he was back last week. But it's been a while since the three of us have actually been on a show together. So joys to that to end your year. On today's show, we will preview the 2024 MLS SuperDraft. Call out a few names that TFC might select with the number one pick, if they even keep the pick. We'll finally finish off our 2023 player over-unders. We got 5 more players to get through. I know we've been promising that since I think like late October. We will give each of us our TFC story of the year. What was the thing that the headline that will make us remember 2023, even though we really do want to forget it at times. We will announce a winner of the Nesker holiday kit giveaway, and of course, get to the question.
Guys, it's me. I won the kit.
You're actually going to win the shirt off Jeff's back. He will not wash it before it gets into you.
Bonus.
So maybe you regret joining the club. Lots to dig into. Jeffrey P. Nesker, Michael Singh are in the house. Gents, how are we?
Andre Wolf. Oh my God, Andre just made my holiday season. Apparently, the Adidas store at the Eaton Center has the yellow letters and numbers. I spoke with them yesterday.
Ooh.
You know, never would have guessed, because if you go online, there are like 2 heat transfer printing spots for TFC kits in the GTA, and they're both owned by MLSE. So I am going to, although the Eaton Center has kind of been a bit dodgy recently with respect to people screaming expletives at each other, I might.
That's just a Tuesday, man. Like, that's Queen's Station attached to.
Yeah, is getting Coaggio on this kit worth, being put in harm's way with peaceful protests? I don't know. I'm on the fence. We'll see.
Fair enough. Mikey, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good, man. I'm like you said, I'm happy that the 3 of us are back to wrap up this year. It has been a minute, and this is a show I've been looking forward to for a very long time, because it's been a while since TFC have had the first overall pick. Now,
I know
how much stock people put into first overall pick, but I think in any sport, first overall pick comes with some kind of feeling where it's excitement, and it's maybe even the start of a new era. I mean, that's probably a bit too much pressure to put on the first.
Not on the
in recent
draft.
years.
Come on,
yeah, exactly. No. But there have been some hits. There have been some big time hits, but we'll get into some of that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting time as we're now getting into sort of the real push of player movement in MLS. Waiver announcements, re-entry drafts, all the drafts are happening.
All of them.
This
week. 1 through 28, all of them.
Exactly. So we'll get into that. But before we get into all of that, I think I want to address really quickly the sort of big kind of soccer news story in North America, or at least in Canada and the US. There was a big Apertura Clausura final in Mexico. That's much more important. But the United States Soccer Federation got a little surprise on Friday when Don Carver, on a nice little Friday news drop, announces that starting next season, so the 2024 US Open Cup, MLS first team rosters will not be participating in US Open Cup. So no US, no US MLS clubs. Not say clubs, sorry, first teams will participate in the Open Cup. Now, those clubs will be able to field their MLS Next Pro teams. So basically all their
Division 3 sides, which is
can now join the Open Cup. And it has sparked outrage. It has sparked a lot of different comments. We're safe here. Just in case you haven't heard, TFC, Montreal, Vancouver will participate in the Canadian Championship next year. So that is not sort of a Canadian problem at the moment. But wanted to get your guys' reaction, because this is kind of a big thing, and a thing that speaks to maybe the integrity of soccer in North America in terms of how we view sort of the traditional kind of roles and tournaments that is enjoyed around the world. So we just want to get your guys' takes on that. Jeff, start with you.
It's horrible. There's nothing good about it. It's so cynical. We know what's mitigating it. It's an entirely money thing mitigated by Apple. There are so many different ways you can attack it, right? Like we're bringing Messi to North America to grow the game. And then less than a year later, actually, it's a closed system and we don't want to share Messi with Louisville or Las Vegas Lights or whatever the case may be. It's also a shot across the bow at the USL because they're basically pimping Division III sides over and above USL Championship sides. It couldn't possibly be more cynical with respect to the fact that Don Garber calls out fixture congestion in the same breath as he talks about this stupid Leagues Cup thing that nobody wanted. That is the source of fixture congestion. It is, and then to say nothing of the fact that, how far removed are we from the Sum deal collapsing when the U.S. Soccer Federation was propping MLS up. And now that MLS can supposedly stand on its own 2 feet, the thanks that the U.S. Soccer Federation gets is this. And I'll close with the fact that they're in violation of FIFA rules. They can't do that. It's written right in the FIFA charter. And there's going to be some significant blowback from this. It's a lot. It's a lot, guys. We've been inundated with anti-soccer nonsense coming from MLS HQ far too often over the last couple of years for my liking. And this is untenable. Like, can you imagine if the FA did this or any European league did this? Can you imagine the blowback? Even today, I'm seeing people saying, this is going to have a trickle-down effect because some of the smaller European leagues are going to see it as establishing a precedent, and then saying, well, why do we have to have our first teams play in our domestic cups, et cetera, et cetera. It's very dangerous ground. I really don't like it. It's got the same horrible taste as the shootout rule. Americans, right or wrong, there's this desire to fix soccer. It doesn't need to be fixed. It doesn't need your input. And then when you couple that with just how cynical this is and how it's a bunch of people in boardrooms trying to figure out how to maximize their investments that have really no ties to the game and how they're turning it into like this quasi NFL professional wrestling nonsense. It's so distasteful. It really, really is. On the eve of a World Cup, no less. We're like getting further and further away from,
tournament now compromised because of more questions. And yeah, it should.
Yeah, it's just one of those. Look, it to me, it's a move to protect Leagues Cup.
Of course,
it's a move to protect the tournament that they created to essentially try to beat Mexico because for a long time couldn't beat Mexico in the real Cup.
With a cash prize that dwarfs the U.S. Open Cup cash.
Yeah,
prize.
Exactly. Like the U.S. Open Cup is it's 300,000. I think is the prize
to win it. Yeah,
and I think it's like a couple million for Leagues Cup. Look, it's a property they created with Apple to maximize that revenue, and then you get the extra blessing of getting Messi, and then he's good, and then his team goes and wins Leagues Cup. Like these are opportunities to grow the quote unquote brand, right? Like that's the
brand. Exactly.
That's the play.
Not game anymore. Brand. Their
exactly.
brand.
And that's, it's just kind of sad, right? And like, look, I've seen the counter arguments about like, look, people don't care about the Open Cup in the early rounds. If people really cared, would they go to these things? I would say keep those teams in and let MLS clubs decide how they want to play their rosters, right? Like if they want to
every other federation.
Yeah, like if they want to play kids, okay. I mean, I would have questions around, competitive balance and does that make sense? And are you robbing lower league teams of the opportunity?
It's better than not playing at all. And these younger kids certainly need minutes. We only have to look at Toronto FC to see that there is a space for minutes to blood younger players. And look at your team. Does Man United send their first team squad? I mean, right now they sort of have to. Sorry, that was
but historically Manchester United has dropped out of the FA Cup before, right? Like they did it after they won the treble. They basically said, we're not playing in the FA Cup. Now there was massive blowback for it, and they were penalized for it, but there is present. Now that's a club compared to an entire league deciding they're not going to play.
And you misunderstood me. I meant like you tend to see a lot of squad rotation in cup games versus league games. And that's, MLS can cry foul that the salary cap doesn't allow for deep enough rosters, but that's an MLS problem. And certainly the answer isn't to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Basically nothing coming from them as rationale as to why this matters for anything other than the most cynical, like knee-jerk reactions holds any water. Like the emperor really has no clothes here.
One kind of glass half full, it is now another platform competition to get the younger kids into meaningful matches on maybe a bigger stage, maybe a stage with some more stock into it. And maybe that'll make clubs invest more into their academies, which MLS is making a really big push towards that. So there is maybe some positive to come from it, but I think overall that should be a decision MLS clubs should be making.
Yeah,
should be able to make. No, they don't mandate it. Like you can play the kids if you want. If you want to play, like you deal with your load management and fixture congestion like big boys. Like everybody else does. And yeah, I hate it. I really, really hate it. And I hate the facile kind of party line tweets that are coming out from like the Sasha Klestins of the world that you can tell they're beholden to their masters and that they're tweeting out the party line, but their real thoughts are nowhere near this kind of thing. It's putting people at serious disadvantages because they're now fighting against this giant behemoth. And Andre said it a while back. What did he say? He said Apple should have just bought US soccer. And it sort of feels that way. It's like, it feels like a hostile takeover. Like they've got the money, just go ahead and do it so that we don't have to suffer through these growing pains.
Yeah.
It's interesting that this is last thing. It's interesting that this is an MLS decision. And they have some kind of sway over the US Open Cup, but they haven't decided to touch Canada at all. I'm curious as to why.
Because they don't care.
No, one, they don't care. And two, for the MLS clubs, I think the Voyageurs Cup still means a lot in a sense that it's probably their easiest route to get to Champions Cup, right? Like in theory.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, from that perspective, I think, there is look, the way that the Voyageurs Cup is formatted differently than the US Open Cup. And I will agree with some critics out there that have come out and said, look, the format of the US Open Cup, the regionality, the way that it's sort of done in the early rounds kind of doesn't allow for it to grow in terms of a spectacle. And I kind of see that. But there's only 13 teams. I think there'll be 14 next year in the Canadian Championship. So there's not enough teams. Fixture congestion with the cup, is it really that big a thing for the MLS sides? I don't think so. And then, like you said, Mike, off the top, in terms of Bill Manning's view, and this is probably the same view that Montreal and Vancouver have, right? Getting the Champions Cup's an extra $1.5 million in the coffers, right? So if they can get that berth and they can get that relatively wrapped up certainly earlier than they would through the standings in MLS, why would they want MLS to pull them out of the cup, right? Like,
I don't think anybody wants to rock the boat because you're already getting special sanctions from UEFA. From CONCACAF to play in MLS as Canadian clubs. I think if you're too squeaky of a wheel here, like Andre's saying, there could be, this is worst case Ontario, but there could be a situation where the Canadian owners, make so much noise that they get forced into the CPL because we are an international league under special circumstances for the Canadian clubs. So
I don't think
I think it's bigger than you allow it for, but less than I'm positing. I think it's somewhere in between, but certainly I think that they don't want to rock the boat because it is such dicey waters, and we've seen how it manifests. When the boat is rocked, right? And U.S. Soccer Federation right now is a wounded animal. So why would you get into a room with a wounded animal?
Yeah, fair enough. I will say this to end this. If they come out on Friday and said that Toronto FC were out of the Voyageurs Cup, this would be a very different podcast.
Very different show.
I would be
very different
bloody murder because I love that cup and I love that tournament, and
I love the US Open Cup. I mean, it's one of those great comebacks when people say, soccer's new in North America. You can point to the US Open Cup. It's one of the oldest domestic championships on the planet. Like, people don't know anything, and to see it besmirched to the level that it is by corporate overlords is we're not going to get pro rel. Certainly not in our lifetimes, probably not in our children's lifetimes. This is a slap in the face to even the attempt of it. It's circling the wagons with vested corporate interest again and again and again, and it's making something that should be open to everyone sent there, vis-a-vis the Open Cup, into yet another closed system. Where only the people that are chosen to play get to play, and that's
Canadian American soccer CPL right now. Not that much different.
Mm-hmm.
But go Wisconsin Mooncows SC. Hopefully they get to a US Open Cup final in the future.
Yeah, another team shuttered today, and there was a tweet. I'm not going to guess the numbers, but it's like something like 70% of all U.S. soccer clubs last 3 to 5 years before shuttering up.
Did you just say you're not going to guess the numbers and then proceed?
And then I did.
Yeah,
well, I was waiting for somebody to come in and say, "Well, I read that tweet too, and here are the right."
Well, I did read that tweet. It's it's Rio Grande Valley's out of the USL, so that's a shot to their
my boys are going to help me out. That's
absolutely
how we roll. That's
absolutely. All right, guys, that's a perfect transition / not perfect transition into our chat about the MLS SuperDraft and TFC. As we've talked about on the show for the last couple of weeks, they do have the number 1 pick. The draft is tomorrow. If you're watching this live, obviously it's a Monday. If you're listening to this on podcast, it's probably today. TFC have the number 1 pick in the draft. And as Mike, you said off the top of the show, it's been a while since TFC had the number 1 pick in the MLS draft. You have to go all the way back to 2013 when they had the number 1 pick, and then promptly traded away to go down to the 3rd pick and picked my friend and yours, Mr. Kyle Becker, Mr. Forge FC, with that pick. And funny enough, the number 1 pick that year was Andrew Farrell, who has now been one of the most steady, consistent right backs in the history of the league.
Center backs too,
and center back. He did play center back for a while as well. But it's, as you said, Michael, there are opportunities to pick, you may get a franchise player. It's very, very rare these days. You get that through the super draft, but you at least have an opportunity to pick somebody who can make a real impact on your roster. But I guess my question to you guys to start this off, and Mike, I'll start with you, is do Toronto FC even keep the number 1 pick? I know you guys talked about this a little bit last week, but now that we're sort of a day away, do you think they actually end up keeping the number 1 pick?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one that TFC are still weighing. Jason Hernandez, I believe when he spoke to media, it sounded like he was going to keep the number 1 pick. But things can change. And just, I guess, for context, so last year, this would be 2023, the first overall pick was traded. It was traded by Charlotte. Traded by St. Louis City SC to Charlotte. The deal essentially was for about $450,000 in general allocation money to move down to the 20th spot. So dropping 20 spots in the draft, you're getting about $450K. Now, I'd argue that this draft is probably worth more, given that there are a ton more draft eligible prospects. So I think the league released a list of almost 400, which is way more than we've seen in past years, now that they've opened it up to sophomores and juniors who are now eligible for the draft as well. So I would argue that this draft is probably even more, is worth more, this pick. So, things can change, but I think right now we have to assume that TFC are going to keep that number 1 overall pick and make a selection come Tuesday.
Absolutely. Jeff, your thoughts?
First, Gord, glad to see that you're doing well. I missed shouting you out and wishing you a speedy recovery on last show.
Absolutely.
So I'm glad that you're back and looking like you're resting up and getting strong. I'll paraphrase Rachel here, because I'm firmly on her camp with respect to what we should do here. I think we use it, but I think we use it on somebody that we are well aware is not going to be contributing this year. We use on somebody whose development path is a little bit longer, because Herdman's got enough to deal with respect to fixing the locker room and with respect to blooding younglings and getting a tactical identity together. Unless we get an offer that we can't refuse. But here's the thing about GAM. We didn't do much in the first stage of the reentry draft, which was a surprise to me. I know, Mikey Singh, you've been stressing not to expect anything soon, but that was a surprise, because I don't know if we're gung-ho about the super draft, and I don't know if we're gung-ho about the reentry draft. So what have we got in the horizon? I mean, all signs point to something exclusive of those two mechanisms, which does mean that we probably need as much roster flexibility as possible.
Well, there's still stage 2 of the reentry draft, so that's something I think we'd really keep a close eye on with TFC. I was honestly, I was surprised too that they didn't do anything in the first round of this
I'm not that
super
surprised.
draft, but you have to make like a bona fide offer. You have to
refresh my memory. Like basically,
that's
first stage is a handshake. Second stage is you have to make them an offer.
Vice versa.
Yeah.
Where the
first stage you have to make them an offer.
You have to make them an offer, I believe, in both. But the first stage you have to automatically exercise their option. I think.
Yeah, so you have to pay them what they were paid last year, essentially.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm not surprised that they didn't go in the first round.
Why have two stages? It makes no damn sense. Anyway, whatever.
So round 2 is probably going to be. I mean, not many people were taken. Players were taken. There was a couple. You can count on one hand. But round 2 means all those players, I believe, slide then down to round 2, making that list a lot bigger. So that's something
team-friendly deals. Yeah.
Expect them to be a bit more, or team-friendlier. I would expect them to be a bit more active there.
Yeah, for sure. That in the second round of that draft, that's where you can kind of, you can say like, hey, we'll give
swoop
you
in and haggle,
take a little bit of a haircut on the pay to come in.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you guys are right. It does sound like they're going to keep the pick. I am for trading for assets. However, there does seem to be a couple of players, when you read mock drafts, when you read some of the things about some of the available players, that there's talent out there in the top end of this draft. Maybe more so than in other years in terms of more impactful talent. We got a few names here that have been sort of shouted out on different draft boards and things like that. I want to thank, first of all, Travis Clark at Top Draw Soccer. He gave us a link to his mock draft. Some interesting names. And at the top of that list, I know I have somebody at the top of my explanation notes here on the show run, but I want to talk about Kamani Stewart Baines, Maryland winger. Canadian. He came through Vaughan, Missouri. He actually got a developmental contract with HFX Wanderers in the CPL this summer. Spent the entire summer there before heading off to his first season at Maryland. Big Ten Freshman of the Year, winger, really pacey, really great sort of on the ball skills. In Travis's mock draft, he has him going to TFC at the number 1 pick. I guess my question for you guys is winger where we really need to be focusing that draft pick? Like, are you picking best potential or best upside, or are you picking something that's more of positional need?
Mikey, I forgot to mention one thing that you said that I also really agree with. We need assets. We don't have any anymore. We need to restock the cupboard. And now I'll let you speak.
Yeah, no, there it is. It's best potential all day of the week. TFC don't need one hole to fill. They need 11 holes to fill, essentially. So at this point, it's just you got to go with the player you think is going to end up being the best player. Yep. Now, KMS or KSB?
KSB.
He's exciting. He reminds me of a mix between Jaden Nelson and DeAndre Kerr.
Turks agrees.
they would get him at a young age as well. So like he'd be one of the youngest players, I
Yeah, I
believe,
think
in
he's
the
like
draft.
19. Yeah.
The one thing though is I don't know as of if anyone's listening to this in the podcast, but as we're talking, I don't believe the Generation Adidas list have come out.
I haven't seen it.
And
It was supposed to drop, but I haven't seen it.
in order for him to be eligible, he would have had to sign a Generation Adidas contract. So if it ends up that he doesn't sign a Generation Adidas contract, then he would not be eligible. But I think a lot of people, if he does sign it, have him at the top of their list or right near the top of the list. You add in the fact that he's Canadian. He's got, again, a ton of potential, and that a Generation Adidas contract is super valuable because it doesn't count against your salary cap. So I'd be all in on taking Kimani Stewart Baines first overall tomorrow.
Oh, that's 2022. I almost posted a link to last year's Generation Adidas class. I was very excited.
Yeah, they number it weird because basically they're calling it the 2024 draft. But
yeah. It's like baseball
but-
cards or
yeah.
cards. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. So just going through Kamani's sort of CV, I mean, he played in League One Ontario in the U19, so the reserve league. He didn't actually play I think he may have got a few minutes at senior level with Vaughan, but he mainly played at the U19s and scored like a bag full of goals. I think it's like 19 goals in like 14 or 15 games for Vaughan. So tons of talent, and definitely, if he didn't decide to go to school, he might have actually ended up on a CPL roster for going into next year. But obviously, an opportunity to go number one in the MLS SuperDraft if he signs as a Generation Adidas contract. Sure, I think that's a good idea. I do have a small sort of thing about, okay, yes, maybe high upside, and I get that, but do you also maybe look at a forward, a depth forward for yourself?
More of a striker.
How many? I mean,
he's a winger.
He is a winger. You go on potential, but yeah, I mean, the thought of adding any more forwards to this roster gives me highs.
The one thing you have to, but the one thing I'll add is that he's also a Maryland product. And if you look at TFC's draft history, Maryland is a school they often go to. Yeah. So maybe there's an extra bit of incentive there.
I think they have some kind of, because a lot of academy players that don't end up signing for the same and go there is either Syracuse or Maryland. A lot of them go to Syracuse
or Maryland. And they've also leaned into Georgetown a bit lately as well.
Exactly.
Shout out to Chara.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, that would be one they would have to give some long thought about. And if they do end up passing on him, the first thing you think of is like a Tajon Buchanan situation where they decide to go for Griffin Dorsey, and then Tajon Buchanan goes
Dane St. Clair
2 picks later, and that one came back to bite them.
I mean, a little bit. I mean, Turt's asked a question that I think we all know the answer to, and it's, can we trade down and still get him, or is it consensus number one? The answer is, until those Generation Adidas come out, we don't know. Because correct me if I'm wrong, as a Canadian and a GA, he would have zero cap hit.
And no international spot as well.
Exactly. So, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Like, that's a ton of
what I'd say about that is anybody who signs a Generation Adidas contract, I would be surprised if they're not taking in the top 5, 7. Like those guys get snapped up really quickly.
Yeah, obviously from a cap perspective, they help out. Another player that seems to be a player that some people out there have targeted for TFC is Jacob Morrell. He's a striker from Georgetown, as you mentioned. So another place that TFC has gone to a couple of times in the draft. He's a former National Player of the Year. Another impressive season over at Georgetown, 11 goals, 4 assists. So a guy who that can put the ball in the net. This from College Soccer News, just saying that he kind of reminds them of a Duncan McGuire or a Brian White type player. Duncan McGuire is a guy who bossed us around this past season with Orlando in his rookie season. And of course, Brian White, the striker at the Whitecaps, who's found a nice little connection there out west. And again, that's where I kind of make that question. I don't necessarily disagree with you. I do think that going after Kamani Stewart-Baines makes sense from like you're probably getting one of the players with the best upside. But if you want to fill a need,
zero, yeah,
and you look, a lot of those forwards that we have on the roster probably going to be out the door by the time training camp comes around. Do you maybe take a flyer on another college striker?
The thing is that the one thing that gives me reservation is that he is a sophomore at this point, and he would be looped in, I think, with that same group of players who are not quite there yet. And I feel like he would be added to this big clutter of forwards we have in the same kind of profile, same kind of mix.
Cool.
And we already have Hugo and Bonge there. And Jordan Cruz is coming back. We'll see what happens exactly with his future. There is one here. I mean, Iowa Canola is still technically in the mix. I don't know if they'll be able to move on from Iowa Canola, or if, even they want to, because now John Herman's in, and John Herman's a guy who worked well with Iowa Canola in the past. So that's the one reservation I would have there.
Fair.
I echo that reservation. There's a lot of forwards that we've treated poorly already on the books. I don't know if I necessarily want to add another to the funeral pyre.
Plus, we drafted a striker last year that went back to college.
That went back to school,
that ended up being the nation's top goal scorer, right? So, we also have the rights to another striker.
We do.
Yeah, and I think I read today on John Molinaro's piece that they're still in discussions with him.
Yeah. So maybe they don't go down that route. Maybe they go down the route of getting some defensive depth. The draft traditionally has been a place where clubs go and get defenders as sort of depth pieces and try to build them up potentially into starting pieces in Major League Soccer. And one of the highest rated is Nate Jones, a center back out of Washington. We talk a lot obviously about forwards and the lack of goals that TFC scored this year, but we also talked a lot about the defensive issues that this club had over the season. And I wonder, maybe they go and look in the center back position and they maybe find a young player that they think they can, have a bit of legs and be able to sort of mold in the John Herdman style, especially if they start playing three at the back.
Yeah, Nate Jones is a guy who was going to go high. Like, he will be a top 5 pick, I think so. And that's based on all the kind of mock drafts I've been able to get my hands on, essentially. What I've read is that he fits the modern day center back mold, where essentially he's very mobile and good with the ball at his feet, stuff like that. So he checks a lot of boxes. So maybe he's a guy that could actually come in and slot in right away. It's very rare for center backs to do that at such a young age, but the really good ones are capable of stepping in at a young age. So he'd be, if TFC want to go the defender route, one of the things I think Jason Hernandez said was that the draft is pretty well spread across between defense, midfield, and forwards. So they do feel that center back isn't their best way to kind of add to that pool at center back is through the draft there. He could be an option. That said, you have a kid like Lazar Stevanovic who is coming through the ranks right now. I don't know what's going to happen with Adam Perlman. I believe he is out of contract right now, so his future is up in the air. You have Theo Rigopoulos, who is also a guy who is coming through the ranks. You have center backs also a couple years away. So, like, the center back position, while it's a tough one to nail, you never really can forecast what exactly a center back will look like. They do have some depth, at least, coming through the ranks there. The only thing, in favor of making this pick is John Herman, as we know, loves to play in a back three, right? And you use more center backs, obviously, more often. So having a guy who's mobile like him, that could really, really be appealing to John Herman.
Yeah,
for sure.
This guy's my pick.
Wait, he's your pick?
He's my pick. Can play both sides of center back. You can slot him in at a fullback. He can be an attacking modern fullback if necessary. He's got utility on the defense. And as Gord says, Jones is the guy I want as he drafted. And he's kind of a time-tested player already with 50-plus games already in Louisville in 4 years. So he's got some experience at that position. None of this is a sure bet. I just like the utility. I like the utility of a young, athletic center back that can play either side and also is pretty good in possession and moving forward. So to me, I mean, that's somebody that can earn minutes right away.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, I think that if a lot of draft boards are comparing him to a Miles Robinson, and by the way, that's a player that is available in the free agent market right now. Do you want to go try
As a
sign
DP,
Miles Robinson?
yeah.
Or you do want to go draft the next Miles Robinson? Well, I mean, look, and there's no guarantee, of course, right? Like this is a draft. These are young players. We don't know what they're going to look like in MLS. I defy most listeners right now. I've watched a ton of NCAA soccer over the last few months. But these are a couple names that have sort of floated up as potential picks for TFC.
Mm-hmm.
Just an honorable mention to Marcus Caldera. Probably not going to be a top, sort of, 5 pick potentially. But the Virginia forward, he's out of Mississauga, came from Sigma, signed a development contract at Forge, got actually into a couple of games with Forge in 2022, I believe, might be 2021, but had a great season at West Virginia, expected to be drafted, but expected to be drafted further down. He's more of like a target forward at West Virginia, but he may play a different position when he comes up to into the big show into MLS.
Yeah, no, definitely. Fingers crossed that he drops far enough for TFC to have them taken. I think they have the 30th overall as well. That's their next pick that comes up. So fingers crossed that he's a guy that drops far enough to be taken there. TFC also have 2 third-round picks as a byproduct of trading down for them from that re-entry draft position. So I mean, listen, this is deeper. This draft is deeper than ever before. So having maybe some later round picks where they actually have found a little bit of success lately. Mostly, I think recently, Luka Gavrin is a guy they took an early second round a couple times out. So like the super draft right now, it is a blessing and a curse in a sense that there are so many players now available, which is great because it opens up the prospect pool and you could take some swings, but there's also a higher chance that you kind of do mess up here, and there are better players that get taken because there's just naturally more players available. So hopefully this is something TFC been prepping for a long time, because it is super important that they get this right.
Well, I mean, let's be real. We've probably been in the position to be near the number 1 pick for quite a while through the season. So you're hoping that they had, done some scouting of some players. And look, you talking about KSB. He was in your backyard for a long time. So hopefully they have an idea of what he can do if they do decide to go down that right. So it'll be interesting tomorrow to see what TFC do with that number 1 pick. Like you said, could herald sort of a newer age of Toronto FC. But I think anybody they pick might be a bit of a longer term project than not necessarily be day one, step in, be a contributor right off the bat. But
it'd be lovely if they were.
Yeah.
I had one name floated to me before I got on air, right before I got on air. This is completely off the board. So I don't know if anyone really has them in their mock drafts, but there's a guy at Lipscomb, a striker. His name's Tyrese Spicer. Sorry.
From where?
It's Lipscomb.
Okay.
So he had a terrific season, won a couple of accolades, and he's a guy that can put the ball in the back of the net. So just something to keep an eye on. He's also a guy that I believe has completed his 4 years. He's pre-signed to a contract, so he would be able to come in, and if TFC are looking for someone to make an impact right away, that could be a guy to watch.
It would be very TFC to take the number 1 pick and go completely off the board.
Yeah.
Off the board. I mean, I will say, like, mock drafts in MLS are like few and far between. So like when we say board, it's like we're relying on like 2 people.
Yeah, that is true.
So this could be someone like internally throughout the leagues. And they had the showcase as well.
Yeah. Hot tip from Mr. Spicer right into your inbox. Hey, check out this. I don't know him at all. Tyrese Spicer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, everybody now rushing to YouTube to see what this guy's about. But don't do that until the show's over. Do that after the show's over. All right, guys. Let's move on to finishing our 2023 over-unders. I know a lot of you in the comments love the fact that we were so wrong on so many of our over-unders. So you get to see some more. We've got 5 more players to go through. So Jeffy, if you want to sort of tee up who we're going to be talking about today and sort of looking at those, that'd be awesome.
I can't believe it. This is like a Festivus miracle. Number 13, Kobe Franklin. Here we go.
Kobe Franklin is something we didn't talk about last week, even though I was going in alphabetical order. I skipped over him because he literally just got signed. Super happy for the kid. He's a guy, fullback, can play both the right and left, and I wouldn't be surprised if later on in his career he can also play center back, maybe in a back 3. My favorite thing about him, this is why I put it down for the over-under. So my over-under for Kobe Franklin is whether or not he gets over half an assist, so at least 1 assist this season. Because my favorite thing about Kobe Franklin is the way he delivers a ball. Like his ability to swing it across, whether it be from a set piece or whether it be on the fly. There's not many better kids I've seen. I don't know how many minutes he's actually going to get this season. I think he might be in line just based on the way TFC's depth is playing out.
Yeah.
What do you think about Kobe Franklin? Just a stat for you, he has 7 assists in his career in USL and his next pro matches. So 7 assists in 44 matches.
This is a tough one because it depends on if he's going to get enough minutes. I actually think he will. I think he is going to be actually the depth piece at the back positions, but I think he's going to get some minutes, and I will take the over on that. What the number is, I'm not sure. Maybe 1 or 2. Jeff here has the over as well. I'm assuming for a similar.
You guys,
you're going to take the under?
I'm going to take the under. After I hyped him up, after I spent like 5 minutes
hyping him up, that you say no, he's not going to make it.
Mikey, you were so close. You were so close, and then you decided to be hipster. Yeah.
Also, I thought Kobe Franklin was much taller than that. I do not see him as a center back. I don't see him being a center back in a back 3. I don't know. But
you got everything else right.
Kobe. Yeah, incredible season. I think he ended up finishing with 2 assists total.
Yeah, it was 2. Yeah.
So credit to him. I mean, he played a bigger role than I think anyone thought, and I still think he can be as great at delivering a ball. His best asset is his relentlessness, that Richie Larea X factor kind of. You'd love to have a player like that on your team. So his pace, his work ethic, all of that, he checks a lot of boxes down there.
Indeed. Next up, Hugo. Number 14.
Hugo Mbonge, brother of Valpriso, 5 goals, 6 assists, and 18 MLS Next Pro appearances. He's 18 years old. He's a striker, can also be used on the wing. So I'm going to say over under 1.5 starts this season for Hugo Mbonge.
Yeah.
What do you say, Mike Newell?
Under. I don't think he's in the plan this year. I think he's like an 18-year-old who is still a project. He'll get a lot of minutes at MLS Next Pro. Okay, he may get a minute here, a couple of minutes here in a cup game, like in Canadian Championship.
Do you think he gets 1 start this year?
No.
Doesn't get a single start?
No.
I'm going to go over.
Like you're going to go
over? I'm going to go over.
Okay.
I agree with you. He's still very much a project, and I agree with you at the current moment, the way that it's set up, he's not in their plans. I just don't have complete faith in their attacking options. And while Hugo Mbonge is clearly behind guys like Iowa Canola and Diamande and Jordan Perusa for that matter, I wonder if at a certain point frustration will boil over and we'll give Hugo Mbonge a look, whether that be in a Canadian Championship game or whether that be in Leagues Cup. There's a lot of soccer to play this year. What does Jeff have?
He also has sided with me and gone with the under.
I say give him a start.
I'll throw that caveat in there. Like if he just tears it up in MLS Next Pro and just looks like he's way too good for that division, then sure, he might get an opportunity. I don't know if it'll be a start. I just don't see a start.
It's Hugo Mbonge season. I'm all in. I like that clip. I sounded really smart in that clip.
Yeah, you did.
I definitely was not that down on TFC strikers at like the very beginning.
No.
But it seemed like I was, so I'm just gonna run with it. That was exactly.
No, I'm gonna. We're gonna loop that one for you, so you can play hero ball and get all the flowers. It's so frustrating. I mean, why didn't he get more minutes this year? When the bottom fell out, I don't understand it. We're getting back into this, like, why was CJ Sapong getting all
Yeah, there's
the
one point during
conversation?
last season where I said if I have to watch another CJ Sapong
I remember
start
it.
for
Yeah.
TFC, I'm never watching a game ever again.
Yeah, it belied all logic. I mean, you have this core of guys, potential or otherwise, and here you are at the end of the world, and you're still not giving them any minutes. Like, it beggars belief. It really, really does. That, and Hugo especially not getting a bigger look. I don't get it. I don't get it.
So I know he had at least one start
He
last
did
season.
Yeah,
He did.
Did he have
He
two?
had a second. I think he only had the one, but let me just double check. But I think he only had the one.
Okay, it's good that
I'm
we're
double
prepared
checking.
for the show,
Yeah, I
Mm.
know.
like
Hold on.
pros, like we
Yeah.
usually are.
Yeah. So he had one start. Yeah.
He had one start.
Yeah.
All competitions.
All competitions. Yes, 11 appearances.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like, I don't have an issue with that because when he did play, it's not like he was, making really much of an impact, right? Like, he was just not at that age, right? So it's good for him to get his feet wet. The environment too. I mean, I don't think you need him on the pitch where you're just touching the ball 4 times a game, chasing the game the entire time,
CJ Sapong's job.
losing games. Yeah, exactly. Maybe you just needed someone to fall on the sword there, but still, I'm still very high on Nigo Mbonge as he develops here and grows out.
Yeah,
He's
but
developing here. I mean, this feels like Listen, if I'm Hugo, I'm so pissed. Like, I'm like, what more do I have to do? Like, seriously, like, to be even given a look at this club. And then to say, well, we put you out there for garbage minutes, mid-season when everything was in the crapper and you didn't perform. This is a forward. I'm a firm believer that they need regular reps to perform. CJ Sapong's outstanding debut goal notwithstanding, I just don't think he's had a fair shake. And if I'm in his shoes, I'm super, super pissed. So
yeah, Hugo's again an interesting one where I don't know if he's served by playing in MLS Next Pro, but I don't know where he gets his minutes in MLS.
It's kind of a tweener, like in between.
Yeah, he's a tweener.
And I don't like is he better off going on, like, if he's not in the plans for next season, like if they go out, which we think they're going to do, and go out and get a striker that would be a first team player, day in day out kind of guy. Do you send him to CPL? Do you send him to USL, a league where you're playing grown men and you really need to sort of be day in day out? I just don't know if it serves him to sit on the bench again at TFC.
Is CPL better than MLS Next Pro?
I would say yes.
I don't know.
I would say yes.
I don't have an opinion.
I would say yes, just simply because you're dealing with the organizations that's their first team. In MLS Next Pro, there's a hierarchy. You're not getting the good milk juice boxes. You're not getting you're getting the leftovers of the first team, whereas there is no higher level with a forward. Sure. And I think that mitigates all aspects. So, if it's a question of the quality of football, I still think the CPL wins.
No, 100%. The CPL wins.
Yeah,
I mean, and I think it's just better for him to, again, like I said, grow up. Like in MLS Next Pro, you're generally going against your peers, right? Like the same players. You can't ignore
the Jason Russell Rose and the Mo Farsis, and the guys that chose MLS Next Pro over CPL and played for an MLS Cup winning side, right?
Here's my thing about MLS Next Pro, and we'll get off this because this is not the point of this segment, but just really quickly, the difference is really around your organizational structure and how you value that team and how you put that team together. And at Columbus, they put that team together with the identity of winning football and really playing in a certain way. And I don't think that is reflected as much at Toronto FC too. right? It really ebbs and flows depending on who's down there, right? And I think that will be for a lot of MLS Next Pro teams, but that's especially the case for TFC too. And although I do think there is some value in playing week in and week out in a professional setting at MLS Next Pro, I do think quality-wise and just getting better, I believe that could be better served in the CPL level for somebody like Hugo and Mbonge to really play at that kind of high level. 28 games in a regular season. This team is fighting for something. You know what I mean? Those teams are fighting for something. Whereas like MLS Next Pro, like those teams want to win. Don't get me wrong, but if they don't win the MLS Next Pro Cup, is it the end of the world? Is it like, do people lose their jobs over it? Do people get traded or not signed because no, right? Like, so I think that serves a lot better than, playing in a league where really it's just about getting minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, there was TFC used to have like a relationship with, Dent or a Danish team, I believe it was. HB Koje, is that who it was? Where Rocco Romeo and Noble Okello went out on loan too. And part of the reason what Greg Vanny used to say about that was that he wanted to see those guys go out and just become men by living on their own, living away from families and kind of growing up and maturing that way. Is that something maybe Hugo Mbonge has to go out and experience? And as you mentioned, get that experience playing against older guys that, are competing for more than just, growth and development. Maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, the unfortunate association is we're telling Hugo to do what Canadian players had to do before there was a CPL and before there were MLS sides that had their MLS Next sides. We're telling him to pull in a TIBA or a JDG, get on a plane with $5 in your pocket and go play your wares in Europe, sort of thing. If TFC can grease the wheels for that, fantastic. But I don't like the associative value of it. I do think we talk about pathways and we're all in agreement that he's a bit of a tweener. There has to be a place for him to land where his Canadian passport is a blessing, not a curse. What are we doing this for?
It's the Canadian Premier League.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's the Canadian Premier League.
Exactly. 100%. 100%.
Yeah.
There, his passport is a blessing, not a curse. And dealing with the opposite, where the Canadian passport is often a curse in MLS, I think the answer is right there.
Fair enough.
Oh, right. Sorry.
Yeah, got another player.
Shane O'Neill. Here we go.
Shane O'Neill.
Okay.
I don't think anyone expected him to play as much as he did. Last season for Toronto FC, he made 21 starts, an alarming amount for a guy I think was brought in to be TFC's third center back. Because obviously he had Carlos Salcedo and Chris Mavinga as well. So I'm going to set Shane O'Neill's over-under at 17.5 starts.
I'm going to go over. Obviously, one of the center backs gets hurt. What I actually think might end up happening is Sigurd Rosted may not work out the way we hope he does.
I'm going to go under, I think. I don't think he makes 17.5 starts this season. He'll definitely make more than 17.5 appearances. I'm not sure he makes 17.5 starts.
Okay.
What does Jeff say?
Jeff agrees with you and most of the listeners. He's going under as well.
17.5 starts or 17.5 concussion protocols. Which one did he?
Rude.
Catching strays. Yep. Mm-hmm. What was
for the record? So he made 10 starts and 14 overall appearances. Sorry, I got that wrong. No, actually, I did get that right. Sorry. Yeah, 14 appearances, 10 starts.
Yeah, another tough season, I guess, for Shane. He's dealing with a lot, but still a guy who can, be your fourth center back. He's not making a ton of money. And I will say, if there's one guy on the team that I could go sit down and have a beer with, it would probably be Shane O'Neill. One of the best interviews on the team. Seems like a very, very interesting guy.
Do you think he's back? It's on the books.
Yeah.
He's got a guaranteed deal. Yeah.
He does.
Me too.
Would he have value? Maybe. Again,
maybe.
maybe. Would he have value elsewhere? Perhaps, but he's also like such a good veteran to have around a group, a team. Even when he's not playing, there is a difference that he is making. But he still is capable of slotting in and sliding in when you do need him.
Mm-hmm.
Fair enough.
Absolutely. Second last one, our penultimate one, Jonathan Osorio.
Jonathan Osorio.
Okay.
I'm setting the over-under for Jonathan Osorio goals at 8.5.
This is a tough one. This is probably the toughest one out of all of them.
Thank you. I take that as a compliment.
I'm going to go under, and I'm going to go just a shade under. I think he may get to like 7 or 8. And also, I think his role might change a little bit. It depends. If Insigne's out for a while, then he may have to be a guy who scores more than 8 goals for his team to get where it wants to go.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm going to go under. I thought he capitalized on a lot of fortuitous bounces last season, which, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from him, but a lot of the times you look at his XG, those goals don't go into the back of the net.
Cool. Jeff has the over on that, by the way.
On Ozo. He's all in Ozo season.
He's all in on the Ozo season. So, hey, look, we love our boy Oso, future captain of Toronto FC, but it was an under. It was definitely an under on that. So officially
Not
4 goals.
Year.
Yeah, 4 goals this year.
Damn.
Yep.
Yeah.
Damn.
It speaks. I think that it speaks a lot because, like, look, when and his biggest scoring seasons with TFC, they've had losing records. Like they've been near the bottom league. 2018, this past season, or sorry, the 2022. Excuse me. And it's interesting. I do agree with you now, looking back at it, Mike, that a lot of his goals were fortuitous bounces or, just
great finishes.
Great finishes or from angles that you really shouldn't be scoring goals. Yeah. But he's got the ability to score those. I think that's why so many of us, do think of him as somebody who could be a potential sort of late run in the box midfielder goal scorer. And I still think he has that in him. Yeah. But again, I also think, I think his role did change a little bit. I think he sat a lot deeper than he did in 2022. And therefore, that attributes to it. Plus, I mean, he was injured for a chunk of the season as well.
I think that this season was the emotional toll he bleeds for this club in a way that is becoming rare at TFC. And to be around that environment and to see what's happening on all fronts, to live through that experience, and we don't know anything, honestly. Like, we can speculate, but we don't know anything. But I do think that this year weighed heavy on him emotionally. And, in addition to all the things that you've said before about being deeper in the field and what I said, which is how can you be late into the box to score on opportunities when there are no opportunities, right? What comes first, the chicken or the egg? It's a bad year for Ozo because it was a terrible year for the team, and I think the two go in tandem.
Yeah, and the one thing through all of that, I've got to give credit because Ozo showed up. Ozo always left it all on the pitch. So it wasn't like a work ethic thing with Ozo. It wasn't an attitude thing. He 100% still, like as Jeff said, like and Mike said, bleeds for the club. 1 to 10, just quickly, concern level for Jonathan Osorio considering his contract. Mike, I'll start with you.
In terms of like a drop off?
Yeah, like what's your concern that he doesn't get back to the level and actually is worth the contract?
It's hard. It's hard to. I always find it hard in these kind of cases to say, like, what is he going to get to the level of the contract that he's paid? That there's so many exterior factors that contribute to the number that they get that we can't control and don't really have as much to do with on the field performance. But to answer your question, there is a bit of concern. Like I think that, look, he's 30 now, but he's had injury issues of various kinds over the last couple of years. He played 21 games this year. Look, I think the question becomes, do you find a sort of a different role for him again? Right? Like, are you going to have him sit? Is that really where he's best? I think he's better a little bit more forward than he is sort of being like an all hustle kind of 8, right? Which is the debate we had about Jonathan Osorio when he was younger, right? So it almost feels like we're coming back full circle to the same conversation we probably had about him in like 2014, 15. But I do have some concern that you're not going to get the quote unquote DP level production from him. But that said, it's hard for me to blame him for that because he didn't sign to be a DP. That wasn't the plan.
Not on him.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. I don't care. I mean, in a world where we're paying those two frauds, exponentially higher than Oso, I'm not sweating his contract, and I'm not holding his feet to the fire in a way that the whining wingers seem to be immune to. There are bigger crappy contracts at TFC, and I can name two of them immediately.
No, fair. I think it's just important for us to talk about, right? Like, it is.
I agree.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is what we get to do. I am a bit concerned given the injury history with Ozo. He's 31, turning 32 in July. And the thing about Ozo, like what makes him so great is his, again, kind of that Kobe Franklin factor, is his ability to cover a lot of ground in a lot of different areas. Ozo's kind of like an engine in the midfield in a lot of different ways, and he's got the skill to play with, really good, talented players. But he, and it's a byproduct of the environment, 100%. It seemed like he lost a lot of confidence last season. Right?
Yeah,
there wasn't as much
he did.
touches in tight spaces. There wasn't as much, clean, crisp passes. It wasn't the same Ozo we saw a year ago when he was coming off a high with the Canadian men's national team, confidence from a World Cup, playing on that stage. Now the hope is that, hey man, like John Herman's here. Ozo we know is John Herman's guy. There's got to be a way to get back to what he's been for a good amount of his career.
I'm not worried about Oso. I'm really not. Fix the club, and I think Oso's fine. He's just sort of drowning under the emotional weight that he's had to carry because nature abhors a vacuum, and it might have felt to him that nobody gave a crap about the club, so he had to give 4 times the amount of care, and now maybe that weight's lifted off his shoulders.
And he's also never been in the position of his career where he had to have been the go-to guy. Whereas this season, he was expected to be that in the midfield, right? He's never, ever had to be that guy. He's always been a guy you can throw in the field as kind of like the complementary piece and kind of makes everything else click and does all the little things right that you want in kind of a player in that position. But because of, maybe that DP tag and because of, the lack of offensive options or even just options in the midfield TFC had, and because of the injuries to Insigne and Bernardeschi stayed relatively healthy but like wasn't productive, and injuries to Insigne and the lack of production from a striker, all of a sudden a lot more of that falls onto Ozo. Where when Ozo's at his best, maybe it's a bit of like this Michael Bradley kind of comparison, but he's the guy that kind of just brings everything together.
I agree. I 100% agree.
Fair enough.
100%. Anyway, we're going to wrap them up, which means that I get like 300 gigabytes back on my computer hard drive at the end of this episode, which is going to be great. Here we go. It's Raul Petretta.
Raul Petretta. Over under 3.5 assists for Raul Petretta. Just for context, in 152 appearances for FC Basel, he had 10 goals and 12 assists.
Yeah, I'm going to go over. I think you're going to need him to have 3.5 assists to get to where you want to go.
Yeah, and I think you might just get an assist or two just by laying the ball off to a guy like Lorenzo Insigne or swinging in a couple crosses, Diamande or Federico Bernardeschi. I think, I'm going to go over. All competitions, I'll go over.
Yeah, Jeff has the under, actually. And I saw some people in the comments have the under. Jeffrey P.
What a great edit. I cut you right at.
No, it's okay. You brilliant man.
No,
you got the under right on
you
that.
must have been saying and then I decided to cut you before you went
It's
into
all
more
good.
stuff.
It's all
That was
good.
a terrible edit. That's not how I want to be remembered by. That was an absolute.
Be remembered by this. You
Um,
get your flowers because you got that right.
did.
It was under.
Mhm.
You only had 1 assist this year, so
And I only have to add these 5 to the 45-minute supercut of these things that I'm going to put up on YouTube that no one's ever going to watch. But yeah, I knew. I had a feeling about Raul. I knew.
But let's put it this way: he played the 3rd most minutes on the team this year, right? Like he played a lot. Like he got into 24 matches, started 22. It's just that sort of production wasn't there.
He's not a bad player.
Mm.
He's not a bad player whatsoever. Does he offer as much as I would have hoped he would have offered moving forward? No, he doesn't. But he is 100% a guy that you can rely on when he's playing, when he's healthy, to do his job. And I truly, firmly believe that. Is there more to come offensively? I hope so. He still isn't. He's not an old guy. If he was on a cheaper deal, I would love Raul Petretta for Toronto FC. The fact is he's not on a cheaper deal, and this is a way that you do have to measure someone's value in this league. So he's overpaid, sure, but I still think he's a player.
Interesting. There's a few comments in here. I can't highlight them like you can, Jeff, but like Turts and sort of Mike Newell saying like he doesn't necessarily fit into the new system. I don't know. As a wing back, I think he could.
I think he
even
does.
As a
it's better
left-sided center back.
Yeah.
I think he could be like a bit of a Kamal Miller, where Kamal Miller was converted from a fullback to a center back under John Herdman in a back 3.
Nice.
So he could slot in as a left center back, but even as a wing back, I think there's space for him.
Yeah, absolutely. The question just now becomes, can he, again, I feel like the question you asked us about Oso, you actually apply to Petretta, right? Like in the sense of, not necessarily are you worried about declining return, but just more of can he play to the level of the contract that he's playing under? Because like he is still the highest paid left back in Major League Soccer.
Yeah.
Right. So from that perspective, that you got to get something out of that.
I'm surprised. He's 26 years old, right? He's got Champions League experience. Wow. He's only 26 years old. He's got Champions League experience. I am less worried. I don't know. I hope this doesn't come back to bite me. Jeff, don't clip this, but I'm less worried than.
Wait, hold on. What's the time
Raul Petretta
for no reason?
I'm less worried about Raul Petretta's form diminishing than I am about Jonathan Osorio's form diminishing. Right, it's natural. Like he's 6 years older than Petretta and plays probably a more important role. More demanding, more important role for this team. So, I think Raul Petretta. I think his first season overseas in Toronto, I really feel like he's still got a lot to give.
I do as well.
I love it, Mikey. Positivity.
I'm hoping you're right because me too. They don't have a lot of cover at that left wing back. Like once if it's not him. They're gonna have to sign. Somebody.
They're gonna have to sign players.
They're gonna have to find somebody to do that. All right, boys. Let's move it along here. Story of the year. So this is how I want to go through this. I'm gonna point to one of you guys, and you give me a headline or a story this season that is going to sort of for you capstone the 2023 Toronto FC season. Jeffrey P. Nesker, I'm actually going to start with you. What is the headline that you're going to, or thing that you're going to take away from this year that sort of capstones everything?
The complete schadenfreude that every single decision, every move we made didn't just go wrong, but so spectacularly wrong, so worst case Ontario that it's mind-boggling. It's like if you did the math and tried to calculate the chances of that happening, it's unbelievable. Like everything went bad. The worst possible outcome of everything. That's pretty spectacular.
Yeah.
Not TFC.
For me, it's inside Toronto FC's fractured culture. It's seeing Bernadeschi clash as Bradley distrust. That was the story published by The Athletic. Paul Tenorio, Tom Bogert, Josh Cloak. We've had both Paul and Tom on our show. We've talked about that story at length.
Mhm.
But now that we were a few months removed from it, it really signified and was a wake-up call to what exactly was going on behind the scenes at Toronto FC. And I think it was also a wake-up call to those within the dressing room. I think it's very rare where a story shakes organization in the way that Athletic bombshell shook Toronto FC. And a lot of the stuff that was, going on for the better part of 6 to 12 months leading up to that story, that all of a sudden came to light. And that does not happen very often nowadays. And when it comes to professional sports, so it's got to be that story overall. And I think that story is actually the ripple effect to some of the decisions that, will be seen now. It has already been taking place, and now within, the next 6 months or so.
Yeah. And mine is sort of a side piece to that, because I think that's sort of the, if you want to call it, the sort of center of everything, and everything sort of shoots off from there. But it is Michael Bradley's retirement. And for me, and I think the nature of how it went down, and there, on this one hand, there's an opportunity, fans at least got an opportunity to show him love and give him his flowers and send him off. But as I remember, the days, literally it was just days leading up to it, and the actual night itself, and him coming to the South End and having, like, it felt like it just wasn't enough. Like, it just felt like, here is this man who gave a decade of his life to this club, who, let's be real, if things worked out differently, would still be here.
Yeah.
And still in our city. And it just spoke to just that article, the culture, what was going on, what's still kind of the ripple effects of all of that. Yeah. And yes, okay, I've seen the memes and the jokes now that Staubach's been relegated. But I just think that it as much of an opportunity was, and you got the images, and you got the opportunities to say goodbye to a club legend, a real true club legend, it just went the way that these things go at TFC. Whimper. It was not clean. Yeah. It was not a way to send out a player like that. And I think, I can't believe it hasn't already, but I feel like this will eventually really hurt the club if they can't fix this. Like, if they really can, especially with Michael Bradley, of all players, where Josie Seba is one thing. If they can't fix it with Michael Bradley, I really do think this really, really hurts the club in a lot of different ways inside the soccer world in North America. And I think there are potential repercussions. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I just, when you have that feeling that, there's people looking at the club a lot differently, sort of looking at the club sideways now. I think there's repercussions there.
You know what's crazy is that 100% every day of the week should be the right answer. Michael Bradley retirement should be the biggest story in Toronto FC this year. And the fact that there's even a debate that it wasn't, is just such an indictment of just how things have been at Toronto.
Because it's impossible, because you cannot express it. Like, you can't just say Michael Bradley retired. It has to be prefaced or post-scripted with, well, they sacked his dad, and this was the plan, and then this and this and this happened.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like, it's not just like, oh, Wondolowski retired. He got a little old, and maybe he didn't want to lace him up anymore. There's a whole story that goes along with this. Whether whichever side you are, context is everything in this. That's why it's so wrapped up in everything. The Athletic article and the pervasive worst case scenario of every single decision that this team made over the last 12 months of the last calendar year. Yeah, it's a mess. But I was having this thought. They're going, there's a good chance that Dundas Station renamed, right? It's going to bother us. in the same way that I walk by Bloor and Bathurst and I don't see Honest Ed's there and I want to vomit. But somebody that's 10 years younger that's coming to Toronto FC because they won, hopefully they won MLS Cup 2026, they don't have the same association with Michael Bradley that we do, in the same way as you yearn for the Man United that newer fans of Man United, it's not even a muscle memory to them, right? It's going to hurt for us, but to say I don't think it's going to have, it's the business, we're for our innocence with our TFC innocence is lost for some of us, this season, there's a definite end to that era and we're going to have to deal with it. But for the next along the train, the best we can hope for is that they remember Michael Bradley for the reasons that we want Michael Bradley to be remembered. I think the club recovers from this. Winning solves everything. If they win with an entirely different group of players, it's who's that guy on the statue, who's balls.
Yeah, you're probably right. But I also look at, I'll use Sporting Kansas City as an example. Okay. Two of their gold, if you want to call it golden generation, whatever you want to call it, the last two guys that were left from the 2013 MLS Cup winning team retired, or there won't be with the club. I don't know if Robert Espinoza is actually retiring.
Yeah.
But the way they went out, right? They had, there's no controversy on how they went out. There was no locker room crap about what was going on. There was no, is there this back and forth with the club? They just got to play football. The fans got to love them and say their goodbyes, and then they got to retire and are probably going to be back with the club at some point in some capacity. I don't know when this gets healed with Michael Bradley and his family. And look, put Bob aside for a second, because what happened with Bob kind of had to happen, right? And I think there's a lot of people who acknowledge that. I think even Michael, to a certain extent, will acknowledge that.
It was untenable, absolutely. And the gaffer usually
but
falls
I think there were a lot of things in the last couple of maybe seasons, maybe the last two at least, that clearly soured Michael Bradley on maybe not the club as a whole, but just staying here. And maybe whether it's taking a role in the club or, just staying connected in that way, that it was basically I'm out. Me and my friend, we're out of here. Right. When it looked pretty clear that they were going to stay not that long ago.
Well,
so we don't know exactly we don't know what happened privately. That could be completely conjecture. But
I often think about this, Mikey, and to me, I always have to remind myself it hasn't just been one bad season, it's been 3 bad seasons. And and they've been excruciatingly bad seasons, right? And that crushing reality, I think, hit TFC land en masse this year, because it was about patience. We're willing to accept a crappy half year because here comes Lorenzo, and also there was a pandemic and we're playing out of Hartford. Yeah. So we were able to hand wave away a lot of the bad. Oh, and hey, we almost won the Supporters Shield in 2020. We were able to find excuses to insulate us from the crushing reality of how horrible things are until the very moment that we couldn't. And there's no place to hide anymore. So yeah, I just think that, this year was the straw that broke a whole bunch of backs. And if you're Michael Bradley and you're taking pay cuts on the regular so that the team can invest in being competitive, and then for your troubles, they sack your dad, he's a human being. Of course he wants to get the hell out of here. Things are rotten. This team is going to have to figure out a way to win now to maintain relevancy. And, never say never with past stars. But yeah.
Yeah. And it was everything leading up to the firing of his dad. And we heard about the Italians and how they were, really pushing to get Bob Bradley out too. I think Michael even mentioned this. There was no plans for him to retire, heading into this season. right? That all was a byproduct, I think, of what really transpired behind the scenes.
Mhm.
And some of the stuff, and who knows, might not all come to light. But I don't think Michael Bradley is. I know Michael Bradley's not happy about the way the things ended, despite how
Yeah.
classy he was about getting out of here. Last thing on this, just honorable mention, shout out to John Herdman being appointed as Toronto FC head coach. I still think that's an insane story, considering
Mhm.
all the stock that he had at Canada Soccer and the direction that that program was heading towards the World Cup. So jaw dropping that he's now. It still is kind of surreal that he's now the head coach of Toronto
Speaking of
FC.
jaw dropping, did you guys listen to his player profile interview?
Yes.
Where
Yes.
I mean, wow.
Yeah.
This is a guy who's capable of self-reflection. Almost, I'm very excited to see like what he brings to the table in terms of attacking this mountain of shit that is our club right now. I think it's going to be interesting. If nothing else, is going to be really, really interesting to watch.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
We are behind it here. We are in big trouble, and we need help. So let's go.
Fair enough. All right. With that said, we'll move into the burning question and head on out. So next, the burning question. The burning question presented by Nesker. Nesker is the official community app of Toronto FC. It's also where you can connect with the people and local businesses in your neighborhood. We've been posting the burning question each week throughout the year. Thank you so much for those that have been interacting in there and leaving comments. Really appreciate it. We're putting the extended clips from the show and things like that in the group as well. So join the group by downloading the app or going to Nesker.ca. Where before we do that, let's make somebody a winner. Let's make an early a little early holiday present for somebody.
Sure,
So
we
thank
are.
you for everybody who entered by following the YouTube channel, by joining the Toronto FC fan group in Nesker. And without further ado, your winner is, drum roll, it is Derek Gagnon. Derek, I hope I pronounced your
Derek.
name,
Yeah. We know
last name
Derek
correctly. But if you're watching live right now, see if you can.
I can DM him
message
as
us.
well.
Yeah, let's DM him so we can get his information and get that shirt out to him. But congratulations, Derek. Christmas came a little bit early. You got yourself an energy kit. Thank you, everybody, for entering. We really appreciate it, obviously. We hope to bring more fun giveaways in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that said,
I'll exclusively Bernadeschi and Insigne kits at
well, if they get transferred, we can make it a whole box load. It's like, we just got to give away every other day.
I'll bring the lighter fluid.
The burning question this week, for all of you out there, you get to play GM this week. And how are you using the first pick in the 2024 Super Draft? A few comments coming in. Santo on the Toronto FC fan group just saying he keeps the first pick and he takes the kid from Western Michigan. And if he's saying Western Michigan, I actually think he might mean Washington. So he might be talking about Nate Jones. But we need to recoup some young, promising talent. Now, if we can trade Insigne away, we can't trade him away, and have to give up the first pick, then do it. I jump all over that. Can't trade a DP like that. Well, actually, you might now. I think they've changed the rules a little bit on how that
doesn't
works.
matter. No one's taking him.
Yeah, no one's taking that contract. So sorry, Santo, but you may get your wish.
LA,
you may end up getting this.
LA have some open DP spots.
They're
saying they like big shiny
if Greg
toys.
Vanny wants to do us a favor,
Greg Father.
He likes
Greg
wingers,
Father.
right?
You know who you should replace Douglas Costa with? This guy.
Yeah, exactly.
One of these two guys.
Costa Oh man.
Yeah.
Hey, look, if Greg wants to do us a favor, TFC sleeper agent in disguise. Thank you, my friend. Derek on Twitter just says if there's a defender of interest, then that's the pick. Then maybe a defensive midfielder and a keeper and a big man striker, all in that order. So he's got a lot on the draft wish list. Or if all else fails, new president, recent grad from the Sports Evolution there. Yeah, so basically he's looking for Bill Manning out. Fair enough. And then Turts comes in and says, trade it completely, get to the highest bidder, or trade down as many times as you can to collect the Garber bucks from whoever is willing to pair.
Hates that draft pick, man. He hates it.
Well, I'm with Turts. I mean, if you can trade it to get real assets so that you can make signings that help you now, unless you have somebody on that board that is like, we have to get this player.
Nate Jones.
Like,
Nate Jones. Maybe. He works for OCP. OCP. If anybody got that reference.
Well, let's look at the last couple of first overall picks, right? Yeah. So we got Hamidou Diop last year. He barely featured
played.
Yeah.
For Charlotte. I think he made 3 brief appearances, made 9 appearances with their MLS Next Pro team. Still 21 years of age. He was a defender. So, it's a long-term project, I guess, for him. Ben Bender, he's settled in and had some big moments for Charlotte since being drafted.
But Danny he's Pereira, on the trade block, apparently.
Pereira. Ben Bender?
Yeah. Like he had a good first season, second season.
Yeah, so. Danny Pereira, he's a key piece for Austin.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that's a pretty solid pick. Robbie Robinson is a player I liked. Inter Miami. Frankie Amaya, he's a stud. A perfect MLS first overall pick where he's in that ilk of you're not going to Europe, but you're also going to be a very, very, very good
MLS
player. And yeah, he's obviously super important for the New York Red Bulls. Then you got Jean Moutinho from LAFC, Abu Danladi from Minnesota United, and then you got the Jack Harrisons, Kyle Larens, DeAndre Blake, the Andrew Farrell. So that was a good run of first overall picks. But
yeah.
But what I'm trying to get at is you're looking at players who, how much would they be worth? Roughly, anywhere between 400 to maybe $1 million in GAM, right? That's been kind of, at least recently, that's kind of been the price tag for some of these players.
Yeah, definitely above 400. That's for sure.
Maybe a bit more for Pereira, but yeah, I mean, there's give some thought to it at least.
Yeah, I think it's very much with the draft. It's a very much an eye of the beholder type of thing where if there's a team out there that really covets a player and thinks that they can help either right now or in the very immediate future, then
phone's open, DMs are open.
Yeah, they'll go in and they'll spend that GAM to make that trade. But it does feel like TFC is going to hang on to it.
Give us 0 in GAM, but take Insigne off the books and cover his salary. That's fine. How much do you want your super draft pick?
Call up Daddy Vanny in LA, see if he'll do us a solid. The last comment I'll read on this is from our own Jeffrey P. Nesker. Like Rachel Dory said on the pod, find a guy that can develop outside of the chaos of the first team. Herdman has enough to work to do and maybe contribute 2025 and onward. So that may be
this guy's an idiot. What a moron.
Yeah, that might be a KSB situation, especially if you can't get rid of the Italians and you're going to have wingers that are going to still play the majority of the minutes. Maybe that's a situation where you draft them and maybe he goes back to school and plays another year. Or maybe you have him there and you either keep him at MLS Next Pro or maybe even loan him out to get those minutes. That might be a way that they go with this. It will be interesting. I think this is probably one of the more interesting things that they're going to have to decide this offseason is how to utilize this tool that they haven't had in a decade, essentially.
And the best part is we only have to watch the first 3 hours of the super draft to get to the first round.
Well, 2 hours and 45 minutes of pre-talk and then.
Yeah. And here's the super draft dancers. Ha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. Yeah. I'm never watching a super draft again. So one of you two have to do it. Just saying.
Okay, Mike Singh, you're up. Right, let's wrap this thing up for 2023. Thank you so much for tuning in to Toronto Till I Die. Before we go, I wanted to say just thank you, heartfelt thank you for all of you that have been tuning in this past year. We've grown sort of our listenership. We've grown our subscriber base. We've jumped YouTube's links a couple of times throughout the year, and you stayed with us. So we really appreciate that. Whether you watch us live every week or you listen on podcast during the week, your support means a lot to us, obviously, and it keeps us going. And we're looking forward to bigger and better in 2024. Guys, I just wanted to step back and give you guys some space. If you want to say anything before we wrap for 2023 to the loyal listeners out there.
What a year, man. Let's bring the positivity back next year. I'm sick of being angry all the time.
Yeah, man, you guys are making me emotional. No, seriously though, like it was a tough year, I think, for a lot of TFC fans. It was honestly a tough year for us at times, where it was, do we really want to go on the show and just talk about the same thing and just talk about the same tone and kind of go through this over and over and over? So the only reason why we did it, quite frankly, was because you guys kept on showing up all week. We see all of your comments in the comment box as we're watching. It's great to interact and get to know some of you. And yeah, well, honestly, we hope to continue to do this in the new year. And as these guys just said, hopefully it's in a better light and we can start talking some positivity about this team. Because we would rather be positive and bullish about Toronto FC any day of the week, right? So for us to come on here and complain, be negative at times, I mean, we don't love doing it, but it's just the reality of where it is. So I appreciate everybody. I'm proud of us too, guys, for being able to do almost a weekly show. Like there's maybe a handful of weeks that we missed throughout this entire year. So
we're all busy
for you guys too.
The one thing I love,
we haven't discussed this.
Yeah, we have, but I was about to get to that. So the one thing though I loved about the show is even I came back on the over-unders, and me tanned coming back from the beach is way better than Mike right now, pale in a light. I looked at that and I almost cried because I just look so tan.
I was so happy I missed the second episode, so I didn't have to look at my ugly mug when I was cutting your clips. What did Jeff say? Who cares? I don't have to stare at him. This is fantastic.
So that is a wrap for 2023, guys. We will be back in January. We will post when the specific date we will be back. But obviously they will be getting us closer to training camp. More player movement will be happening there. So we'll have a lot to talk about going into the 2024 season. So for Jeffrey P. Nesker, for Michael Singh, I'm Mike Newell. Happy holidays, happy new year, and we'll see you all in January, everybody. Peace.
Happy holidays.
And wait, and baby, I'm TFC till I die.